A simple nurse boarded the billionaire CEO's jet by mistake. Now she's falling in love in Paris. Before we begin, I want to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Drop your city in the comments so we can see just how far this story reaches. And when the story is over, I dare you to rate it from 0 to 10, because this one might just break your heart. Now settle in and enjoy the tale. Winter in New York. High above the city lights, inside a penthouse, wrapped in glass and steel. The air was colder than the snowstorm outside. A young boy, son of a billionaire, sat motionless by the frosted window. It had been more than a year since his tiny feet had walked. More than a year since laughter had touched his lips. Doctors had failed. Therapists had given up. The silence had grown into walls until the night a poor, young woman, a housemaid, barely more than a girl herself, stepped into that room. Her hands trembled as she lifted a worn-out dinosaur puppet. And then the impossible happened. The boy's shoulders shook. A laugh escaped pure, unbroken, like sunlight after a storm. The first sound to shatter the long, lonely silence. That single moment didn't just change the boy. It cracked open the frozen world of his father, the powerful CEO who ruled empires, but had forgotten how to feel. From the narrow streets of Brooklyn, where peeling paint clung to brick walls and car horns battled the morning chill, Destiny Williams pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. She was 24, a black woman, fighting for survival, working any job she could to keep her sick mother and younger brother afloat. And tonight, she was stepping into a new role, nanny and maid for one of New York's richest families. The taxi stopped at a glass tower on the Upper West Side, a place the wealthy called their private kingdom. When the elevator doors opened, Destiny felt her breath catch. Marble stretched beneath her feet. Crystal chandeliers blazed above her. Every door seemed to exhale a kind of icy perfection. Her hand tightened around the worn strap of her purse. She whispered to herself, "Be strong, for Mom, for my brother. Don't back down." And in that instant, the truth of class divide loomed like a shadow. From the cracked sidewalks of Brooklyn to the polished world of the elite, she was crossing a line that few dared to step across. What Destiny didn't know was that the walnut door in front of her was about to open not just into a stranger's home, but into a fate that would alter her life forever. Part 1. Stepping into another world. The worn rubber soles of Destiny's shoes echoed softly, clack, clack, clack against the marble floor. Such a small sound. Yet in the vast hallway, it rose like footsteps inside a cathedral. The corridor stretched long and cold, lined with silver-gray velvet carpet, abstract paintings on the walls staring down at her like riddles she couldn't solve. She felt like a trespasser in a place not meant for her, a stranger who had stepped into another world. Her grip tightened on the faded canvas bag slung over her shoulder. Inside were only a few plain outfits, a small Bible, and a single family photograph. She whispered to herself, "Stay strong. This is your chance, the only chance to pay Mom's hospital bills, to cover Anthony's tuition. Don't falter now." At last, she stopped before a towering walnut door, carved with intricate patterns that shimmered under the chandelier's glow. Her heart thudded in her chest. She drew a deep breath and knocked 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. The door opened to reveal an older butler. His silver hair was slicked back, his black suit pressed to perfection. His eyes scanned her in silence, from her hastily tied curls to the faded blue office dress, down to the scuffed heels of her cheap shoes. No greeting, only an appraisal measured, cool, and impersonal. "You are Williams." His voice was deep, even, without warmth. "Yes, Destiny Williams." She forced a smile, though it shattered in the heavy air. He gave a single nod, turned, and gestured. "Follow me." The moment Destiny crossed the threshold, she felt the line snap taut behind her Brooklyn's cracked sidewalks on one side, this marble kingdom on the other. She knew instantly she would never be welcomed here as a person, only tolerated as the help. The penthouse opened before her like a dream too polished to touch. High ceilings glittered with crystal chandeliers. Marble floors gleamed like frozen lakes. Priceless modern art gleamed from the walls. A glossy black grand piano stood beside a window that stretched across the sky. Gazing down at Central Park, Destiny froze. All her life, places like this had existed only on television. Each piece of furniture could have fed her family for years, and yet there was no joy, no warmth. The perfection pressed against her chest like ice. She thought of home in Brooklyn. Peeling walls, the hum of her mother's old radio, the smell of cheap coffee drifting from the kitchen. Poor, yes, but alive. Here riches echoed through silence, like a museum without breath. Her eyes fell upon a framed photograph on a blackwood table. A young blonde woman, radiant smile, holding a little boy of 3. Her joy seemed to spill out of the picture. So warm Destiny's chest ached. She reached toward it instinctively, then pulled her hand back, afraid to shatter something sacred. This must be the late Mrs. Blake. A chill draft from the air system brushed her skin, raising goosebumps. The penthouse had everything except the warmth of the human heart. A sound stirred behind her. Destiny turned. In the corner, near the great window, a little boy sat curled into a chair, clutching a worn teddy bear, 4 years old. Soft brown hair, round cheeks that should have been full of laughter. But his eyes were hollow. Those eyes met hers blank, unblinking, emptied of light. Destiny's throat tightened. She lowered herself to the floor, her voice gentle. "Hello, sweetheart, I'm Destiny. I'll be here to take care of you." No reply. No movement, only the tiny fists gripping the bear tighter, as if it held the last ember of safety left in his world. The butler's words echoed. Since his mother died, the boy hasn't spoken. He doesn't walk. Don't expect anything. But staring into those empty eyes, Destiny couldn't help but hope. For a smile, for a word, for the smallest sign of life. She reached slowly toward the teddy bear. But the boy flinched, recoiling in fear. Her hand froze, then drew back, her chest aching. She understood in that instant. Samuel hadn't just lost his mother. He had lost his sense of safety in the world. And for the first time, tears stung her eyes. 7 o'clock, dinner. The dining room gleamed under chandeliers. A long table for 10, draped in white linen, polished silverware, sparkling. Wine poured into crystal glasses, yet only 3 seats were filled. Matthew Blake at the head, his son beside him, and Destiny at the far end. The silence was suffocating. Matthew handsome, impeccably dressed, his dark hair neatly combed, spoke at last. His tone was sharp, commanding, "Eat." Samuel, the boy kept his gaze down, untouched spoon resting on the table. Destiny's instinct was to help, to gently guide the food toward him. But Matthew's cold voice cut across the air. "No, he'll eat when he chooses." Destiny froze, her heart twisted. A child of 4 needs love, not orders. The meal dragged on, steak and fine wine cooling untouched. No conversation, no laughter, only the weight of absence pressing down like a stone. Destiny sat in silence, a shadow at the edge of their fractured family portrait. That night, alone in the small servants' room at the end of the hall, she hugged her knees, staring out at the lights of New York. The city glittered like 1,000 stars, yet inside her chest, the darkness grew heavier. She whispered to herself, "I won't give up. If I can't make Samuel smile, then who else can?" because this was no home. It was a palace of ice, a billionaire's castle frozen in grief, and destiny, fragile yet unyielding, swore she would be the spark to bring it back to life. Part 2. The Icebound Master. The glass door slid open without a sound. Destiny stepped into Matthew Blake's private office, a chamber of glass walls rising floor to ceiling, framing Central Park below, its bare trees dusted with the last snow of winter. The gray light of late afternoon spilled across a sleek black desk, polished to a mirror's shine, a laptop, a fountain pen, a tray of neatly stacked files, nothing out of place, not a single trace of dust. The first thing she noticed was the scent dry bergamot, crisp and sterile, as though bottled in airtight compartments. Destiny clasped her trembling fingers together behind her back, whispering inside, "You've come this far. Don't retreat now." And then he appeared. Matthew Blake moved like a line drawn straight from a minimalist painting charcoal suit, midnight blue tie, silver watch gleaming at his wrist. His face was cut with sharp precision, but his eyes carried a thin layer of frost, as if winter had chosen them for its home. His gaze swept over her, not to see, but to measure, from her pulled-back curls to the white blouse, not quite new, down to the scuffed heels. It wasn't curiosity, it was assessment. Swift, exact, final, Miss Williams. His voice was low, clipped, as though every word were stamped like a company seal. "Sit." The leather chair sighed as she obeyed. He slid a thick folder toward her, smooth as a runway, guiding her straight to the edge. "These are the rules of this household," he said, fingers resting on the spine of the file, steady and precise. 1. You do not touch my son unless requested. 2. You do not alter his routines. 3. No visitors of any kind, not friends, not family. 4. No photographs, no recordings, no posts. Privacy is absolute. 5. In emergencies, call me directly. His tone never rose, never fell. It was the voice of a man reciting circuitry, already wired. Destiny's grip tightened on the papers, the smell of fresh ink stinging her nose. "Yes," she whispered, softer than she intended. Matthew leaned back, arms folded, eyes fixed. "The butler tells me you once cared for a neighbor's child in Brooklyn." "Yes, for 2 years, and..." She drew breath. "My brother is 12 years younger than me. I practically raised him." A faint line etched itself at the corner of Matthew's eye. Not warmth, merely the registering of data, filed away in a mental cabinet. "People often mistake kindness for competence," he said. "I hire competence." The words struck like cold steel. Destiny pressed her lips, forcing herself not to respond, not to bristle. "You need this job. Swallow it." He closed the file with a snap and slid a pen toward her. "Sign. I don't have time to waste." The pen's metal tip bit against the page, cold as ice. As Destiny scrawled, "Destiny Williams." Her pulse thudded in her temples. Was this just a contract for work, or a contract binding her to a world that wasn't hers? "Done," Matthew asked, already buttoning his jacket. "Good. Dinner is at 7 sharp. Therapy sessions are 3 times a week. You are not to interfere." And, "Williams," she looked up. "Every softness has a price." His eyes didn't blink. "I don't intend to pay it." The words cut like a fine blade. Her hand trembled as she finished her signature, ink smudging just slightly. She laid her palm over it, as if to hide not just the stain, but the sliver of pride she'd bartered away for her mother's hospital bills. And in that moment, the audience sees it. The smudge isn't Matthew's crack in the ice. It's Destiny's. The next morning, the penthouse kitchen gleamed like a laboratory, white stone counters catching shards of gold sunlight. The maid set down a tray of buttered rolls, the scent of wheat and citrus filling the air. Samuel sat in his high chair, legs dangling, clutching his teddy. His gaze drifted through empty space, unblinking. Destiny held a warm bowl of oatmeal, steam curling like a fragile prayer. She blew gently across the spoon, her voice almost a whisper. Just one bite, sweetheart, just one. Matthew entered, white shirt, sleeves rolled, silver cufflinks glinting, 2 letters intertwined, M and L. Destiny blinked. L for who? His wife? A name carved into metal like a memory trapped under ice. Eat, Matthew said. One word. Clipped. Samuel's hands trembled. The spoon rattled against the bowl. A glass of orange juice tipped. Amber liquid spilling across the marble, dripping to the floor. The silence snapped, sharp as thunder. The maid rushed for a towel, but Matthew's voice cut through like a blade. Leave it. Destiny had already leaned in, catching the cup before it shattered, her sleeve soaking through. She didn't think she acted. It's all right, she murmured, eyes on Samuel, never on Matthew. Everything's all right. Williams. Matthew's warning was low, hissed between his teeth. Rule number 1. Destiny set the cup down, turned to him, steady. Yes, I remember, but liquid was spilling. He could have slipped. Matthew's gaze iced over. He will learn not to spill. In this house, chaos does not rule. The word chaos slid from his mouth like an old enemy's name. Destiny looked back at Samuel, her voice low but unshaken. I'm not letting chaos rule. I'm making sure fear doesn't. Their eyes met. A brief jolt of electricity. Command against compassion. Samuel shrank further into his chair, biting the bear's ear. Eyes glassy but tearless. Destiny's heart broke at the sight. Children who learn to endure often forget how to cry. She coaxed the spoon again, softly. One more try. Just slow. Just us. A pause. Then Samuel's head dipped. The faintest nod. The spoon touched his lips. A breath. A swallow. Just a small one. But real. Destiny's smile was gentle, almost hidden. You did so well. Williams. Matthew's voice, again but softer, half a tone lower. Not approval. Not yet. But a crack. Destiny turned her head. Yes, Mr. Blake. Don't mistake him for fragile, Matthew said firmly. He isn't weak. I don't mistake anyone, she replied, calm. I only respect the wounds I can't see. The air thickened, sweet and heavy, like honey. The maid busied herself, eyes down. Samuel swallowed another tiny bite, and for the first time in a year, someone in that house whispered, progress. That night, thunder rolled through the city. Rain lashed the glass walls of the penthouse, and in the dark, Destiny found herself outside Samuel's door, listening to his restless dreams. The rules had said no contact, but grief does not follow rules, and compassion always finds its own inside. Samuel whimpered in his sleep, clutching the bear as if it were the last safe place on earth. Destiny whispered from the doorway, not touching, not crossing the line, only weaving words into the storm. I'm here. You're safe. Just breathe with me. 1, 2, 1, 2. The boy's trembling slowed. His breath found rhythm. A pocket of calm opened inside the storm, and then she felt it. The presence behind her. Bergamot, rain, wool. She didn't need to turn to know. Williams. His voice was sharp, but quieter than before. I didn't touch him, she whispered. I only spoke. You broke the schedule. You said not to frighten him, she replied softly. I did the opposite. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his face. For the briefest instant, she saw it not the tyrant CEO, but a father, paralyzed by fear, hiding behind walls of stone because he no longer knew how to save his son. One time, Matthew said at last, voice hollowed of its iron edge. Next time, you call me. I will. Destiny nodded. But right now, the best thing you could do for your son is take one step closer. The words fell between them, like a pebble, dropped into water small, but the ripples stretched far. Matthew hesitated, then moved closer, just one step, enough for Samuel to hear. "Samuel," he whispered. "It's me. Daddy's here." Destiny's breath caught. She stayed still, silent, letting that voice, fragile as it was, do its work. And slowly, Samuel's little body relaxed. For the first time in months, the storm eased inside the boy, and Destiny understood. The ice wasn't breaking in Matthew, not yet. But beneath that frozen surface, water still flowed. By morning, the city gleamed, washed clean. Samuel slept longer than usual. Matthew summoned Destiny. The same folder spread before him. "Last night," he said evenly. "The schedule adjusted. You may speak if he wakes. No touching." "Thank you," Destiny answered. "I didn't hire you to teach me fatherhood," he added. "I know," she said gently. "I only remind you, there's still a child here." A flicker passed his mouth, too thin to call a smile, too real to call indifference. He wrote a new line into the rules. "Rule 0, he said, pen scratching. Destiny frowned. 0. "Don't get attached," he said flatly. "Not you to him. Not him to you. Not you to me. Not me to you." "Understood." She held his gaze. "I'll try," she murmured. "But some things, the more you forbid them, the deeper they root." "I live by discipline," he said, "and by loneliness," she thought, but kept it inside. When she left, she paused at the glass wall. Below, children skated, their laughter rising faint but true. Behind her, reflected in the glass, Matthew stood at the doorway, not moving, not speaking, but angled just enough to look out in the same direction. Two silhouettes in silence, bound not by rules, but by something far thinner and far stronger, the fragile thread of trust, daring to form in the coldest place. Part 3. The Child Without a Voice. The heavy oak door creaked softly as Destiny stepped into Samuel's room. It was vast, large enough to swallow the cramped Brooklyn apartment she called home. White light spilled down through towering windows, shining across polished wooden floors and scattering across shelves lined with expensive toys, race cars, robotic dolls, Lego castles left unfinished. Everything was there, everything, except the sound of a child's laughter. There were no squeals of joy, no stomping of little feet, only silence so thick, so heavy. Destiny felt her chest tighten with every breath. In the corner, by the window, Samuel sat in his gray sweater, clutching a stuffed panda. His small shoulders quivered faintly, his thin body lost inside the chair. His wide eyes stared out at the winter sky over Manhattan, where snowflakes fell like secrets, melting quickly against the glow of the city. "Samuel," Destiny whispered. No answer, not even a glance. He sat unmoving, as though she were invisible. Her heart twisted. In that instant, she saw herself at 10 years old, sitting by a cracked window in Brooklyn, waiting for her mother to come home from the night shift. That same loneliness, raw and hollow, still lived in her memory. Samuel existed in a palace filled with everything a child could want, and yet he had been abandoned. Inside his own silence, Destiny lowered herself onto the thick carpet, pulling a small box from her pocket. Inside lay a harmonica, old, scratched. Once her father's, he had left years ago, but the sound had remained with her, the only lullaby that had ever made her feel less alone. She pressed the instrument to her lips. A slow, tender melody slipped into the quiet, floating across the room like a thread of warmth. Samuel startled slightly. His eyes widened, but then he bowed his head again, clutching the panda tighter, still refusing to speak. Destiny set the harmonica gently down. "When I was little," she whispered, "my mother used to sing this tune to me. It made me feel not so alone. Samuel, do you ever feel lonely? Silence. Only the wind sighed against the glass. She stretched out her hand, placing it near his clothes, but not touching. I can't force him, she thought. All I can do is wait. Wait for the day his little heart chooses to open. But the silence that followed cut sharper than rejection. Her effort, genuine and fragile, disappeared into the void, and still she stayed. The next day, the snow thickened. Destiny carried a knitted blanket into the room, draping it gently across Samuel's shoulders. He didn't resist, didn't acknowledge. His gaze remained fixed outside, where children laughed and tumbled in the park far below Tiny, moving specks of joy against the cold. My brother Anthony is your age, Destiny whispered. In Brooklyn, he doesn't have toys like these, just one old volleyball. But when he kicks it down the street, he laughs so loud the neighbors laugh with him. She chuckled softly, waiting, hoping Samuel didn't turn. His eyes stayed locked on the falling snow, as though he were studying a planet where he didn't belong. Destiny's throat tightened. 2 boys, the same age, she murmured. One has nothing but laughs. The other has everything, but no voice. She placed her hand on the cold window frame, and her question hung in the silence. Did wealth give Samuel everything or take everything away? That night, the room glowed in soft amber light. Samuel sat where he always sat, clutching the panda, but this time his small shoulders trembled. Destiny stepped closer, lowering herself beside him without a word. She didn't press. She only offered a tissue, held loosely between her fingers. The boy didn't take it, but his cheeks betrayed him wet with tears. Not sobbing, not crying out, just silent streams of grief, falling from eyes that had forgotten how to make sound. Destiny's chest broke open. You don't need to speak, she whispered, voice thick. You don't even need to cry out loud. Tears are enough. Samuel, you're not alone. Not anymore. He never said a word, but that night, those tears were everything. They were the first fracture in the walls of silence, the first signal that his heart, though buried under ice, was still alive, waiting, just waiting, for a hand patient enough to lead it back into the light. Part 4. The Invisible Wall. Samuel's room glowed under the soft amber of a night lamp. Outside, snow still drifted down like fragments of broken crystal. Destiny sat in a chair near his bed, turning the worn pages of The Little Prince. Her voice was low, steady, carrying warmth into the silence. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Samuel's gaze stayed on the window. Yet Destiny caught the faintest shift, his tiny hand clutching the panda bear just a little tighter. As though listening, her heart leapt. He hadn't answered, but he was hearing her, and that alone was a beginning. Each word she read felt like a stitch, thin threads trying to mend a heart torn apart. Later that night, when Samuel tossed restlessly beneath his blanket, Destiny began to hum, a lullaby low, aching, the same her mother used to sing before illness had stolen her strength. The melody wrapped around the room like a quilt of sound, tender and warm. Slowly, Samuel's eyes drooped. His hand loosened on the bear. For the first time, peace brushed across his small face, and then the door burst open. Matthew stood framed in the doorway, gray suit still immaculate, though the hour was late. His gaze sharp and cold. What are you doing here? His voice was low, but edged with frost. Destiny froze. The lullaby died on her lips. I was only trying to help him sleep. He needs to feel safe. Matthew stepped closer, the weight of his presence pressing down like winter air. He doesn't need this. Don't change anything. Let the doctors handle it. In that moment, Samuel's eyes cracked open. For a fleeting instant, they found Destiny's, then darted away. curling back into the bear, shutting himself off. The warmth she had sown shattered in a breath. Hope snuffed out as cruelly as a candle in the wind. The hallway stretched silent, marble, glowing under golden lights. Matthew stood rigid, one hand tightening at his jacket button, his eyes like blades. Destiny followed, her chest pounding, but her feet refusing to retreat. "You can buy the best doctors in the world," she said, voice trembling, but firm. "But Samuel doesn't need another prescription. He needs a hand, a voice, a heart willing to love him." Matthew spun, anger flaring with something darker, helplessness. "You know nothing of what we've tried. Don't imagine yourself special." Destiny swallowed hard. Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out. "I'm not special. I only know what it is to be a child alone. And I won't stand by while he lives like a shadow in his own home." Silence gripped the corridor. For a heartbeat, a flicker crossed Matthew's eyes, a fracture in the wall of ice. Gone as quickly as it came. "Stay in your place," he said coldly. "Don't overstep." The words cut, final, but the audience feels it. This was more than anger. It was the cry of a man clinging to walls built from grief. Back in her small room, Destiny collapsed onto the narrow bed. Tears streaked down her cheeks, the unfinished lullaby still echoing inside her head like a song caught in half-breath. She thought of her mother, frail in a hospital bed, of Anthony, waiting for tuition money, of herself, an ordinary girl who had stumbled into a world glittering but frozen. And in the next room, Samuel lay wide awake, clutching the panda with desperate force. His eyes, open in the dark, shimmered with tears. He didn't cry aloud. He had forgotten how, but a single drop slid across his pillow. 2 souls, 2 rooms, 1 wall between them, both stripped of the same thing, the right to be loved. Destiny wept silently. Samuel wept wordlessly. And in that haunting parallel, the audience sees it clearly. This house is built on invisible walls, not just Samuel's silence, not just grief, but the barricade of ice Matthew had forged around them all. If Destiny was going to save Samuel, she would have to do more than break through a child's silence. She would have to breach the fortress of a billionaire's rules. Part 5. The Moment of Magic. Rain swept across New York, silver streaks running endlessly down the great glass windows of the penthouse. Gray clouds pressed low, dimming Samuel's room into muted shades of sorrow. Destiny sat at the edge of his bed, her gaze soft on the boy who never spoke. Samuel clutched his worn panda, his hollow eyes fixed on the blurred city lights beyond the glass. Her chest ached. This child is growing up in gold and marble, yet trapped inside a prison no one can see. Then, with a small smile, she reached into her frayed bag and drew out a faded cloth dinosaur puppet, her only surviving toy from childhood. The one she once used to comfort her younger brother when their mother's pain grew unbearable. She inhaled deeply. "Hey," she whispered, lifting the puppet, "meet your new friend." The sight was stark and old, threadbare toy in a room filled with glittering, expensive things, but that was the seed of the miracle. Destiny knelt on the carpet, raising the puppet clumsily but with life in her voice. "Hello, I'm Dino. I'm lost in this big city, and I don't know how to find my way back to the forest." She pitched her tone up and down, playful, letting the puppet bump against the table leg, then topple to the floor. Oh no, Dino is such a silly thing. For the first time, Samuel blinked. His eyes flickered away from the window, settling on the puppet. His lips trembled, almost moving, then fell still. Destiny pressed on, weaving a small world. Dino struggled through the storm, searching for shelter, afraid, but then finding a friend to help. She asked gently, as though inviting Samuel to join the story. Should Dino hide under the table or run to the sofa? The boy didn't answer, but his gaze followed the puppet, tracing each small movement. It was the first spark, a reaction, a thread of hope. Destiny let the puppet clamber onto the pillow, then tumble headfirst into the blanket. She gasped in exaggerated shock. Who put this giant soft mountain here? And then it came. A sound so small, it could have been the wind. A soft, bubbling giggle. Destiny froze, eyes wide. She turned. Samuel's tiny shoulders quivered, his hand covering his mouth, his eyes alive, glittering with joy. Tears filled Destiny's vision. She kept the puppet dancing, even as her chest swelled with wonder. He laughed. After all this time? He laughed. The giggle grew, breaking into laughter. Fragile, unsteady, but real. The first true sound Samuel had made in over a year. It shattered the silence. It broke the invisible walls. And for the first time, warmth poured into the coldest room of the house. The door burst open. Matthew stood there, suit immaculate, face unreadable, but his body faltered. He saw it. The ragged toy, the poor girl kneeling on the floor, and his son laughing. For a moment, his control slipped. He stepped inside, voice low, trembling with an edge he couldn't hide. "What did you do?" Destiny swallowed her tears. "I only played with him." And Samuel laughed. Matthew's gaze dropped to his son. He saw the light in those brown eyes, light he hadn't seen since his wife was alive. His jaw clenched, his breath caught, and still he forced the ice back into his voice. "Don't let me catch you with these antics again." He turned sharply, but his steps dragged, heavy with something breaking inside him. His eyes shone, just faintly. For the audience, it is clear, beneath his command, he was shaking, because the last time he'd heard his son laugh was before he lost his wife. That night, Destiny sat in her small servant's room, clutching the faded dinosaur puppet to her chest. Her tears came freely, but for the first time, they were tears of joy. In the next room, Samuel lay awake, his panda pressed close, but this time, his lips curled into a secret smile in the dark, as though holding tight to the echo of his own laughter. On the rooftop, Matthew stood alone. Rain just ended, the city gleaming beneath him. He looked at the sky, his face tilted upward, and a question rose in him he had never dared to ask. Could it be that what my son needs most isn't medicine or schedules, but love? And so, the miracle belonged to them all. Samuel had laughed. Destiny had proven that love could pierce silence. And Matthew, though he fought to deny, it had felt the first crack in the ice he had built around his heart. Part 6. A glance from afar. Rain still drummed against the glass, each drop tapping a lonely rhythm across the penthouse windows. Matthew returned from a long meeting, the chill of the city still clinging to his suit. He pulled loose his silk tie, his steps heavy on the thick carpeted hall. As he passed Samuel's room, he stopped. The door was left slightly ajar, and from within spilled a sound he had sworn he would never hear again: laughter. At first, he thought he was mistaken. His chest seized, his breath caught mid-throat. He leaned against the wall, eyes fixed on the sliver of light through the crack. Destiny's voice floated out, playful, alive. "Watch out, Dino's climbing the mountain." Oh no, he fell. And then Samuel's laugh, unsteady, awkward, but so achingly real. Matthew staggered, his hand pressing against his chest, as though to keep his heart from breaking apart. It had been so long, a year, perhaps more, since the day of the funeral, since the world had gone silent. He closed his eyes, and a name rose to his lips. The name he had forbidden himself to utter. "Anna, do you hear this? Our son is laughing again." He stayed there, rooted, afraid to step inside, afraid the fragile miracle would vanish the moment he touched it. His body was stone, but inside he was trembling. undone by the sound of a child rediscovering joy. Matthew's hand brushed the doorknob, lingering. Just one twist, and he could be there, with Samuel. He could see the laughter face to face, but Destiny's voice, warm and effortless, filled the room again, and he froze. What if entering shattered it all? What if Samuel withdrew, as he always did before? A storm gathered inside him, pride, grief, helplessness. He had spent a fortune on therapists, teachers, specialists. He had tried every method money could buy, and nothing had worked. Yet here was a poor girl from Brooklyn, armed with nothing but a worn puppet, reaching his son's heart. Matthew's jaw tightened. In that moment, he had never felt smaller. With a shuddering breath, he dropped his hand and turned away, retreating down the hall. Behind him, Samuel's laughter spilled into the corridor, louder than the rain, brighter than any light in the city. And Matthew walked into the dark like a man lost in his own home. Later, his study glowed dim beneath a single lamp. Rain tapped against the windows, steady as a metronome. He sat behind his marble desk, a glass of wine untouched in his hand. The sharp, controlled eyes of a billionaire now dulled, blurred by memory. Samuel's laughter echoed in his mind, tangled with Destiny's words, a sound too foreign, too tender. He didn't know how to face it. He leaned back, one hand covering his face. Why her? He thought bitterly. A girl with no degree, no pedigree, no title, doing what an army of experts couldn't. Jealousy, unfamiliar and raw, gnawed at him. Not jealousy of her, but of his own powerlessness. He, who had commanded billion-dollar empires, could not heal his own son. Rising abruptly, he crossed to the window. City lights smeared across the glass, reflecting his hard, weary features. His hand trembled against the cold pane, and for the first time in years, the voice inside him was not the CEO's, but a father's. My son, I haven't been here enough, have I? You've carried silence for so long, while I buried myself in work. His vision blurred. A broken smile tugged at his lips, wet with tears he had not shed in years. The wall of ice he had built cracked, fissures running deep, but he had no map for stepping through. A titan of finance, a man feared in boardrooms, now sat hunched in a vast, perfect bedroom alone, trembling, whispering to a child who could not hear him. And yet, beneath the despair, a faint light flickered. Samuel's laughter had carved a small flame in the darkness. In the hall, Destiny closed Samuel's door softly, her smile still glowing from the boy's laughter. For the first time, she had watched him fall asleep with peace in his face. Her heart soared. But as she turned, she started. Matthew was there leaning against the wall, hands buried in his pockets, eyes unreadable in the half-light. "Mr. Blake," she breathed. His gaze swept her face, then dropped to her hand, still holding the ragged dinosaur puppet. For an instant, something broke across his expression. Shock, maybe gratitude, maybe pain. He buried it quickly beneath cool detachment. He laughed, Matthew asked, his voice low. Rough. Destiny nodded, eyes bright. Yes, he laughed. I didn't do anything special. I only wanted him to know he isn't alone. Matthew stared at her, torn between belief and denial, wanting to embrace the truth, but afraid of what it would cost him. Don't fool yourself, he said sharply, though his voice faltered. Silly games can't heal wounds this deep. Destiny clutched the puppet, breathing steady. Maybe you're right. I'm not a doctor. But sometimes, one smile is worth more than 1,000 prescriptions, because it comes from the heart, not from theory. The words fell like stones into the silence. Matthew froze. His eyes glistened faintly before he turned away, hiding it, a nearly imperceptible nod. Then he brushed past her, leaving only the cool scent of his cologne behind. But Destiny knew the wall around him had shifted. For the first time, she had struck the wound buried deepest in his chest. That night, Matthew sat alone in his immaculate bedroom, shirt unbuttoned, tie discarded, glass of wine trembling in his hand. The laughter replayed in his head, blending with Destiny's words. Sometimes one smile is worth more than 1,000 prescriptions. The glass tilted, red wine spilled onto the sheets, blooming like blood. His chest heaved, the mask cracked. "My son," he whispered, voice breaking. "I left you too long, didn't I?" The billionaire's eyes, always cold and sharp, blurred with tears as a single drop slipped free, breaking against the strength of his hand. For years, Matthew Blake had been untouchable, but tonight, in the echo of his son's laughter, he was simply a father undone. And the audience knows this was not weakness. It was the first step toward love. Part 7. The Cracked Wall. Morning sunlight slanted through the towering windows of the penthouse dining hall. A white tablecloth stretched across the endless dining table, set with flawless order, golden croissants stacked in a silver tray, a crystal jug of fresh orange juice, steam rising from polished silver coffee pots, everything perfect except the silence. At the head of the table, Matthew sat rigid in a dark suit and tie, flipping pages of the Financial Times. His eyes skimmed the numbers, but his mind was elsewhere, still caught in the echo of his son's laughter from the night before, a sound that had haunted him through every sleepless hour. At the far end, Samuel sat small and swallowed by the leather chair. His cereal bowl lay untouched. Tiny hands clutched an old stuffed toy. His gaze fixed on the window, where pale sunlight spilled across the skyline. Silent, motionless, Destiny stood by, pretending calm, though her chest tightened at the distance between them. The length of the table could have been the length of a canyon. Lorraine, the gray-haired housekeeper who had served the family for 2 decades, poured coffee for Matthew. She had seen everything: his meteoric rise, the sudden death of his wife, the shadow that fell over this boy. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Master Samuel hasn't eaten a thing, has he?" Samuel hugged his toy tighter. No answer. Matthew set down his cup, voice flat. "If he's hungry, he'll eat. Stop coddling him." A hush fell. Destiny's fingers curled against her dress. Lorraine exhaled. Then, for the first time in years, met Matthew's eyes without lowering hers. "Forgive me, sir, but sometimes it isn't Samuel who's refusing. Sometimes it's your coldness that pushes him away." The room froze. The chandelier's golden light gleamed across crystal and silver, but could not warm the air. Destiny's breath hitched. Samuel shrank into himself, and Matthew lifted his gaze, silver gray eyes sharp as steel. "What are you saying?" Lorraine, the old woman, straightened her back. Her hands, lined with years of labor, folded neatly over her apron. Her voice carried the weight of memory. "I'm saying you've built the wall yourself." Samuel doesn't laugh, doesn't eat, doesn't speak. Not because doctors have failed, but because his father locked his heart away. A jagged rip tore through Matthew's paper. Crushed in his fist, he leaned forward, towering, his voice a growl. "You accuse me. I've hired the best doctors, paid millions for treatment. I've done everything." "No, Matthew," Lorraine said firmly, her voice unwavering. "You've done everything except stay beside your son." The words hit like a blade. Destiny's pulse thundered. This was what she had wanted to shout at him since the day she arrived, but never dared. Now, Lorraine had cut straight through. Matthew surged to his feet, chair screeching across marble. "You don't know what I've lost." His voice cracked, fists trembling. Lorraine's eyes softened, but held their ground. "I do. I was here when your wife died. I was here when Samuel cried himself to sleep in my arms while you buried yourself in work. I was here when he stopped calling for Mama, and when he stopped calling for Papa too. Silence. Deafening. Samuel's small shoulders curled inward, as though he heard every word. Matthew turned away, dragging a hand over his face, but it couldn't hide the redness gathering in his eyes. His voice dropped to a broken whisper. I can't bear it again. If I let myself love him, and he disappears like she did if I lose him too, then I have nothing left. The truth ripped out, raw and unguarded. Destiny's throat burned. She finally understood. The man who looked like stone was not incapable of love. He was drowning in fear of it. Lorraine stepped closer, laying a frail hand on his shoulder. But if you keep living this way, Samuel will lose his father, even while you're still alive. The blow landed. Matthew stood frozen, shattered by the truth. Hours later, Destiny carried dishes into his study. She froze at the sound, not typing. Not a phone call, but harsh, uneven breaths. She opened the door. Sunlight poured across shelves of art and law books. At the center, Matthew sat slumped in his leather chair, tie loosened, a hand covering his face. A half-finished glass of wine trembled on the desk. His shoulders shook. He was crying. The untouchable billionaire, the steel-eyed CEO, the man who terrified boardrooms reduced to a broken father. The clink of dishes made him look up. His eyes, red-rimmed and wet, met hers, and for a heartbeat, Destiny saw the wound in him naked, defenseless. Leave, he rasped, voice stripped of authority. Only desperation remained. Destiny didn't move. Her heart ached, but her voice was steady, trembling only with compassion. You don't have to be strong all the time. Not when I'm here. Something cracked. Matthew stared at her, searching for pity, judgment, anything he could reject. But there was none. Only sincerity, only kindness. His jaw trembled. You don't understand. I've lost everything once. I can't survive it again. I can't. Destiny stepped closer, not touching, just near enough. You haven't lost everything. Samuel is still here. He's waiting for you. But the more you fear, the further you push him away. Matthew shut his eyes, and the last of his defenses crumbled. A single tear slipped free, falling into the glass on his desk. Not the CEO, not the empire. Only a man, a father, broken and aching for redemption. Destiny said nothing more. She simply stayed, quiet, present, the one thing he had never allowed himself to need. That night, Matthew stopped before Samuel's door. His hand hovered over the knob. Inside, he heard Destiny's voice, low and tender, singing a lullaby, a melody simple, imperfect, but warm. It carried down the hall like water over stone, easing the tightness in his chest. He pressed his forehead to the wood. Samuel's laugh replayed in his mind, the sound he'd missed for so long. His fingers gripped the knob. One turn, and he could be there. He could see his son's eyes alive again. But the terror bound him. Then came Destiny's whisper inside. Do you know, your father loves you more than anyone in this world. Sometimes, grown-ups just forget how to say it. Matthew's lips parted. His eyes stung. He wanted to open the door, to fall on his knees and hold his boy. But fear strangled him. He leaned against the door, whispering through clenched teeth, I'm sorry, Samuel. I'll learn to love you again, but not tonight. And he walked away, his tall frame swallowed by the shadows of the marble hall. Inside, Samuel curled around his toy, eyelids heavy. Destiny stroked his hair, then glanced at the door. She didn't know Matthew had been there, but somehow she felt it. The wall was breaking. Next morning, the penthouse kitchen glowed with sunlight. Unlike the vast dining hall, it was small, warm, alive with the smell of butter melting on hot pans. Destiny, apron tied, flipped golden pancakes, strands of hair falling loose against her cheek. Samuel sat at the counter, clutching his dinosaur toy, eyes fixed quietly on her hands, watching, waiting. Matthew appeared in the doorway. No armor today, only a white shirt, sleeves rolled. Tea gone. He looked exhausted, hollow-eyed from a sleepless night, but his gaze was softer. He stood for a moment, watching. His son, the woman, the simple ritual of breakfast that his empire could never buy. Pancakes, he murmured. You made those yourself? Destiny turned, startled. Yes, I thought Samuel might like something other than cereal. Matthew hesitated, then sat opposite his son, a choice small but monumental. Lorraine, stepping in, nearly gasped. She had never seen him at this table before. Smiling faintly, she slipped away. Destiny slid a plate in front of Samuel. Just a small bite. Sweetheart, if you don't like it, that's okay. Samuel hesitated. Then, slowly, he cut a piece. He lifted it to his mouth. Butter and syrup melted across his tongue. He frowned, then nodded, almost imperceptibly, a nod so small. Yet it broke Matthew's heart wide open. His eyes burned. It had been so long since he'd seen his son choose something. Destiny's smile lit the room. She glanced at Matthew, their eyes meeting over Samuel's bowed head. For the first time, they shared a truth. The wall was cracking. Matthew set his coffee down. Voice rough. Thank you for this. Not polite, not routine. Real. Destiny answered softly. Sometimes all a child needs is something ordinary. And in Matthew's eyes, something stirred a spark, faint but alive. The wall was breaking, and for the first time in years, hope slipped through the cracks. Part 8. Fighting Together. Matthew's private jet landed at a small airport on the outskirts of Seattle on a gloomy morning. The sky was thick with gray clouds, and the mist from the mountains poured down like an enigmatic curtain, enveloping the land in an eerie silence. Destiny pressed her face against the window, her eyes filled with wonder. In front of her, instead of the cold skyscrapers of New York, there were endless green hills, a vast forest of pines stretching far into the horizon, with the scent of pine resin filling the air. It felt as though she had stepped out of a heavy world and into a place of peace she had never known. Samuel sat beside her, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. The boy remained silent, but his eyes wavered slightly as he watched the trees pass by outside the window. A small change, but enough for Destiny to believe that in this place, something magical might begin. Matthew sat in the front row, his gaze directed out the window, his face closed off as usual. But when his eyes inadvertently met Destiny's, he caught a rare smile from her, a smile full of hope and tremor. His heart briefly wavered, as if even he needed a chance to breathe. When the car brought the three of them to the therapy center, the sight that unfolded left Destiny almost speechless. Amidst the dense pine forest, a building made of glass and wood appeared, glowing in the dim Seattle morning light. The glass reflected the green of the forest, making the place feel less like a sterile medical facility and more like a home hidden in nature. Mrs. Lorraine gently introduced. This is the center I suggested. Sir, they not only use medical therapies, but also incorporate nature, music, and even games. I believe this is the right place. Matthew nodded, his gaze serious. Yet deep down, a cautious hope flickered. He stepped out of the car, adjusted his long black coat, and stood in front of the building. For the first time, he no longer saw himself as the boss of the world, but simply as a father searching for a path for his son. Destiny placed her hand on Samuel's shoulder, softly whispering, "Sweetheart, let's try this together. Okay, here, you don't have to be afraid, because you have both your dad and Destiny. Samuel looked up at her, then turned to look at Matthew. In that moment, the three of them exchanged a glance. No words, but it was a beginning. For the first time, they truly walked together. The glass door opened, the cold breeze, and the scent of pine resin rushing in. Destiny gently squeezed Samuel's hand, and Matthew followed closely behind, silently, but with determination. They had embarked on a new journey, not just Destiny fighting alone, nor Matthew's solitary control. Now, they were fighting together. The moment their eyes met, before the therapy center door, no long dialogue, but enough for the audience to feel moved. A family once broken, now sowing the seed of hope. The therapy room was designed with transparent glass, soft light from the forest streaming through, casting onto the light-colored wooden floor. The space had no harsh antiseptic smell, but rather the sound of birds chirping and the faint scent of pine resin. Green carpets were spread across the floor, along with special equipment both modern and not intimidating to children. Samuel sat on a small chair, tightly holding his stuffed dinosaur, his eyes gazing out the window. The boy sat silently as usual, his small body shrinking, as if building an invisible fortress around himself. Destiny knelt down in front of Samuel, her voice soft as the wind. "Sam, today, let's try something new." "Okay, no need to go far, just one small step." "Destiny will be here with you." She extended her hand, a thin, warm hand, but Samuel hesitated. Matthew stood behind, arms crossed, his sharp eyes observing. He hadn't spoken yet, but the tension radiating from his stiff shoulders made the room heavy. A therapist, doctor. Harris stepped forward gently. Samuel needs a sense of safety before he dares to try. Here, parents play an important role. Matthew, you need to be with him. Matthew frowned. He wasn't used to being guided by others, especially not showing weakness. But Samuel's fragile gaze made it impossible for him to turn away. He slowly walked over and sat next to him. For the first time, Destiny saw Matthew no longer holding his usual cold CEO persona, but instead resembling a father, learning how to reach into his son's world. "Sam." His voice was rough, unfamiliar. "You don't have to be afraid. Dad is here. If you fall, I'll catch you." Samuel looked up at him. In those childlike eyes, confusion still lingered, but somewhere, a spark of hope glimmered. Destiny felt that moment, and she placed her hand on Samuel's hand, while Matthew placed his hand on the other. The two hands touched the small hand. The boy trembled, then slowly let go of the stuffed dinosaur and grasped the two large hands. The room fell silent, with only the pounding of hearts from the witnesses. "Come on, Sam," Destiny whispered, her voice trembling yet determined. "Let's try one step, just one. No one will leave you." Samuel took a deep breath, his little feet lifting slightly off the carpet. His body wavered. Destiny nearly cried from fear, but immediately, Matthew reached out to steady his son's shoulder. The strength and protection from him, combined with her gentleness, formed a steady support. And then Samuel took the first step. Though short and trembling, it was still a real step. The room seemed to explode in silence. Destiny laughed through her tears, while Matthew, for the first time in many years, had tears in his eyes. His breath caught. He said nothing, just gripped his son's hand tighter, as if letting go would make him lose this moment forever. When Samuel let go of the stuffed dinosaur and firmly held both hands, his father's and Destiny's, to take his first step, that was the moment the audience choked up. A child no longer alone, a man beginning to learn how to love, and an ordinary girl becoming the bridge to a miracle. The therapy center in Seattle had a sprawling green garden behind the wooden building, connecting to the pine forest. Seagulls from the distant bay flew back, singing loudly against the gray sky tinged with the golden hue of the setting sun. After the intense session in the room, "Doctor," Harris suggested, "let's try taking Samuel outside. Children tend to let go of their fears more easily when they have the wind and grass beneath their feet." Destiny held Samuel's hand, while Matthew quietly followed behind. They stepped through the glass door, onto the soft grass, still dewy from the rain. Samuel hesitated, looking down at his small shoes. He shrank back as though the world outside might swallow him whole. Destiny crouched down, her voice warm. "Sam, the grass is soft, like a big green carpet. Want to try it?" Samuel didn't answer, just clung to his stuffed dinosaur. Matthew stepped forward, bent down slowly, and took off his expensive shoes, placing them beside his son. "See, Dad's trying too." His voice was deep, a little awkward, like a man learning to speak with his son again. Destiny watched this, her heart tightening. She had never imagined a CEO, so famous on Wall Street, could kneel and stand barefoot on the wet grass, just so his son would feel safe. Samuel hesitated, then removed one of his little shoes. When his bare foot touched the soft, cold grass, he jolted, then let out a small giggle. The sound was fragile, but enough to tear through the fog that had surrounded this family for so long. Destiny whispered softly, "That's right, Sam. You did it." The boy looked at her, then glanced at his father. Matthew stood frozen, his eyes wide, as though afraid this moment was just an illusion. He let out a heavy sigh, but the corners of his mouth curled up a smile. The first in many years, Samuel began to stumble a few steps, falling onto the grass, then standing up by himself again. Destiny ran after him, both worried and excited. Matthew didn't run, but his eyes followed every move of his son, his heart pounding with emotion. Suddenly, Samuel turned back, extending his hand toward him. Daddy." A quiet, trembling word, but clear. Destiny covered her mouth, tears spilling down. Matthew froze, his whole body stiff. Just one short word, but it shattered the icy wall that had built up over the years in his heart. He rushed over, knelt down, and embraced his son tightly. The wind blew through the pine trees, carrying the scent of pine resin, like a witness to the moment when this small family was being mended. When Samuel first called out Daddy on the grassy field, as he took his first tentative steps, that was the call that pulled the father from the cold abyss. It was a moment that left the audience breathless, eyes welling up. The Seattle Therapy Center at night had an unexpectedly cozy atmosphere. In the middle of the wide grass field, the staff had built a campfire, its golden orange flames dancing on the faces of the children and their parents. Laughter mingled with the sound of a guitar playing, blending with the rustling wind from the pine forest. Destiny sat on a wooden bench, draped in a light woolen shawl. Beside her, Samuel curled up against her chest, his eyes still bright from the magical afternoon. Matthew appeared shortly after, no longer in his luxurious suit, but in a shirt with rolled-up sleeves and simple trousers. He looked just like any other father, an image so rare it made Destiny momentarily startled. She stood up to make room, but Matthew gently shook his head and sat down beside Samuel. In that moment, the child was nestled between the two of them, like an invisible thread connecting the three hearts together. A staff member handed each of them a marshmallow skewer. Destiny laughed as she saw Samuel peering curiously. "Do you want to try?" she asked gently. Samuel nodded slightly. Destiny tilted the skewer, letting the flames lightly lick the marshmallow, melting the sugar and turning it golden. The sweet scent filled the air. When she offered the skewer to Samuel, his small hand reached out, but then paused. He looked over at his father. Matthew froze. In his son's eyes, He saw not a decision, but an invitation, as though the boy were asking, "Will you join me, Dad?" Matthew's heart tightened. He reached for the marshmallow skewer, then gently blew on it before taking a small bite, then turning it to Samuel. Both of them laughed one laugh, clear and innocent, the other a bit uncertain. But both of them laughed together. Destiny watched the scene, tears welling in her eyes. "Now, this is the real miracle," she whispered, almost to herself. As the song from the campfire played on, everyone started clapping along to the beat. Samuel suddenly looked up, clapping awkwardly but excitedly. Destiny embraced his shoulders, and Matthew, instead of holding back as usual, clapped along. That moment, under the flickering campfire light, amidst the wind blowing through the pine trees, no longer were they a cold CEO, a poor servant, or a silent child. They were simply a small family, sharing a simple joy. Destiny glanced at Matthew and was surprised to find him looking at her as well, no longer cold, no longer walled off, but filled with gratitude, relief, and something as fragile as hope. When Samuel stopped clapping and waited for his father to share the first bite of the marshmallow, and both of them laughed together, it was clear to the audience that the wall had cracked further. A large part of it had fallen, and this family was beginning to be reborn. The next morning, the soft sunlight filtered through the pines, casting down onto the dewy training field. The atmosphere was quiet, with only the chirping of young birds and the tense breathing filling the air. Samuel stood in the middle of the training room, his small legs shaking in the support frame. His face was pale, his forehead dotted with sweat. Destiny knelt beside him, her voice gentle as the wind. "I believe in you, Samuel. Just one step at a time. No need to rush." Matthew stood behind, his hands gripping the back of the chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had never felt so weak, helpless, watching his son struggle to the point of exhaustion. Samuel lifted his foot, inch by inch, his whole body swaying. One step, then another. He clutched the toy dinosaur in his hand, as if clinging to a safe world. But by the third step, his small legs trembled, then buckled. He collapsed, his body falling forward. "Samuel!" Destiny cried, rushing to catch him. The boy clutched his toy, his face contorted, eyes brimming with tears. He didn't cry aloud, but that silence was more painful than any scream. Matthew felt as though someone had yanked the cord from his chest. He stepped forward, knelt beside his son, his trembling hand resting on the small shoulder. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse. "Dad is here. I'm sorry. I've left you alone for too long. I thought money, doctors, and strict rules would save you. But I was wrong." Tears welled up and fell onto the cold floor. One drop, then another. Never before in his life had Matthew Carter, the man who commanded billion-dollar deals, cried so helplessly. Samuel looked up, stunned, at his father's face. In that moment, what the boy saw was no longer the strict boss or the distant father, but a man breaking down because of the love he had for his son. Destiny silently placed her hand on Matthew's shoulder, her voice a whisper. "You didn't fail, Matthew. You're just beginning to learn how to love your son the way he needs." A beam of light shone through the window, landing directly on the three of them. And then, in that embrace, Samuel suddenly tightened his grip on his father's hand, for the first time reaching out on his own. A small gesture, but enough to shatter the wall that had stood for so many years. Matthew broke into sobs, but these weren't the tears of helplessness. They were the tears of salvation. When Matthew, the cold CEO, who once held the world in his hands, collapsed in tears in front of his son, and the child reached out to his father, for the first time, That was the moment the audience understood. True healing had begun. Part 9. The Call of Mommy. The therapy room that morning was filled with warm golden sunlight. Each beam of light streamed through the wide-open window, stretching across the wooden floor, like painting a shimmering path. Outside the window, the pine forest swayed in the wind, singing the peaceful song of a Seattle morning. Samuel stood at the far end of the room, his small feet firmly secured in braces, his hands clutching his familiar dinosaur toy. His face was flushed with nervousness, his bright eyes gleaming with something Destiny had never seen so clearly before belief. Destiny sat just a few steps away, her smile gentle, her eyes sparkling with tears. "Samuel, look at me. You can walk over here, just small steps. I will always be waiting at the end of the path." Matthew stood behind, his hands clenched tightly, his eyes fixed. Unblinking, he was holding his breath, his whole world now revolving around that small figure. In that moment, he was no longer the cold CEO, no longer the man holding power in his hands, but just a father, breathlessly waiting for his son to come. Samuel lifted his foot, a trembling step, the sound of the braces scraping against the floor, echoing. He tilted to the side, almost falling. Matthew's heart tightened, but Destiny whispered in time, "You can do it. Just look into my eyes. Samuel, you're safe here." The little boy gathered his strength, summoning all his courage to take another step. The early sunlight wrapped around his small body like an invisible embrace. One step, then another. That short distance became the longest journey of his life. Destiny opened her arms wide, her voice choked but determined. "Come here to me. Samuel, come on." And then the miracle happened. Samuel took another step, then another, until the distance was only an arm's reach away. The room was deathly quiet. Only the pounding hearts of the three of them echoed. Suddenly, a weak but clear voice broke the silence from the small lips. Mommy." The air shattered. Matthew froze, his eyes wide in disbelief. Destiny was stunned. Her heart stopped in that moment. She had never expected, never imagined Samuel would call her that. The boy stumbled forward, then fell into Destiny's arms, clinging to her as if that was the safest place in the world. Tears spilled down Destiny's cheeks, falling onto the child's shoulder. She whispered, choked with emotion, "I'm here. Samuel, Mommy is here." Matthew stood behind, his eyes glowing with tears. His whole body trembled, both dazed and overwhelmed with joy, to the point where he could not contain himself. In that moment, for the first time in years, he realized there are things that money can never buy. The moment Samuel first spoke the word mommy and collapsed into Destiny's arms wasn't just his first step in life. It was the step that brought all three of them into a real family. Samuel buried his face in Destiny's chest, his small hands gripping her shirt tightly, trembling as if afraid that if he let go, everything would disappear. Destiny wrapped her arms around the boy, her thin shoulders shaking with each sob. Hot tears streamed down her bright face. The large room had never echoed with crying, not painful sobs, but tears of happiness. Matthew stood frozen behind. The scene before him left him breathless. His son, who had been silent for so many years, only looking out the window, was now calling a stranger by the most sacred name, Mommy. In that moment, Matthew felt both loss and a miraculous gift. His heart was torn. This wasn't the boy's real mother, but perhaps she was the only one who could bring a smile back to his son's face. Destiny gently lifted her gaze, her eyes meeting Matthew's. The two stared at each other, no longer cold, no longer defensive, only two souls trembling before the obvious truth. Samuel had chosen. The boy looked up, his face flushed, eyes sparkling like a lake glistening in the sun, Samuel stammered, his words still shaky but clear. Daddy. Mommy. Those two words echoed through the sunlit room, reaching the deepest parts of their hearts. Samuel suddenly reached for Matthew, his gaze imploring. Matthew shuddered and stepped forward, like a lost man finding his way home. He knelt down, wrapping his arms around both of them, Destiny and Samuel, pulling them into an embrace. For the first time, they became a complete embrace. No class differences, no doubts, only a family forming from the broken pieces. Destiny felt Matthew's shoulders tremble. Then a heavy tear fell onto Samuel's hair. She looked up in surprise. For the first time, this ice-cold CEO cried in front of someone else. He whispered, his voice cracking like a lost child. Thank you. Thank you for bringing my son back to me. Destiny didn't answer. She just held Samuel tighter, letting the warmth spread. And in that moment, the three of them seemed to have found a true home. The first embrace of the three of them when Samuel called Daddy, Mommy, and pulled them together. A small embrace, but enough to erase all boundaries. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, casting a warm golden streak across the polished wooden floor. In Matthew's arms, Destiny and Samuel still trembled. A fragile moment, but complete, as though the whole world had stopped to witness it. Samuel rested his head on his father's shoulder, his eyelids closing, breathing evenly. The boy fell into a peaceful sleep, a sleep he had never known before. The tears still lingering on his face dried under the sunlight. Destiny gently adjusted the boy's hair, her gaze tender. But when she looked at Matthew, her heart froze. The man once the cold, hard CEO, in front of every billion-dollar deal, now sat in silence, his eyes wet, his breath heavy, as though he had just overcome a long battle. He held both of them tighter, as if afraid that the moment he let go, it would all vanish into thin air. In Matthew's heart, a voice rang deep, hoarse, not from the CEO of power, but from a man begging for a chance. Oh God, if this is a miracle, please let me keep it. Please, give me the courage to never ruin this family again. Matthew took a deep breath, then gently whispered, his voice warm just enough for Destiny to hear. I've lost too much. I can't lose more. I promise you, Destiny, with all I have. I will protect you and Samuel. Even if the world turns away, I will not. That vow wasn't a contract the CEO signed on paper. It was engraved into the moment when his heart both cracked and healed. Destiny looked up, her eyes glistening. She had never believed in the promises of rich men. But in that moment, she did, because it wasn't the CEO speaking. It was a father, a man who had just learned how to love. Outside, the late afternoon light began to fade, replaced by the flickering street lights. In the warm room, a silent promise had been born enough to change the fate of three people forever. Matthew's vow, not at the negotiating table, not in a cold stare, but in the arms of his family, where he first vowed with his entire heart. The therapy room slowly fell into quiet. Samuel slept soundly on the couch, the yellow light shining down on his young face. Destiny gently pulled the blanket over him, then sat beside him, her hands still trembling from the emotions. Matthew stood near the window, his broad shoulders tense as though carrying an enormous weight. The street lights' glow reflected on his face, accentuating both his pride and exhaustion. He was silent for a long time, then turned to look at Destiny. That look was different from any before. Not the cold, judgmental eyes of a CEO, but the rawness of a man who had just lost and found himself. You know, Matthew softly spoke, his voice low, like the wind through the night. I used to think that as long as I had money, power, I would keep everything. But really, I let go of the most precious thing. I let my son grow up in silence, and I didn't know how to break it. Destiny looked at him, her heart trembling. Each word Matthew uttered no longer had the metallic taste of contracts, but the salty flavor of regret. She walked closer, stopping just a few steps away. Her voice was soft but firm. "You're not a failure, Matthew. It's just, you forgot that children don't need a CEO. They just need a father. And you can start again. From today, the invisible gap between them, the wall Destiny had always felt could never be crossed, suddenly cracked open. Matthew clenched his hands, his eyes shining under the dim light. He took a slow step forward until only a few inches separated them. In a fleeting moment, he reached out his hand, as if wanting to touch her face. But then, he stopped midair, his hand trembling. His voice was hoarse. "I'm afraid, if I touch you, everything will disappear, that this is just a dream I don't deserve." Destiny looked at that hand. Then without hesitation, she reached up and touched it lightly. A small touch, but enough to break down every defense Matthew had built. In that moment, there was no CEO, no servant, just a man and a woman, both wounded, but finding warmth in each other. That trembling but genuine touch the moment Matthew let Destiny cross the final wall, revealing a heart broken, yet yearning for love. The steady breathing of Samuel echoed in the sunlit room. The white curtains fluttered in the wind, the scent of pine from the forest outside slipping in, bringing a sense of peace, like a blessing. Matthew and Destiny still stood close, the warmth from their touch lingering. In that moment, a small sound suddenly emerged, the sleepy, faint, but clear voice of a child. "I'm hus, Mommy." Destiny stopped breathing. She turned her head. Samuel opened his eyes, still dazed, but his gaze was fixed on her. For the first time, those small lips spoke a word she had never imagined hearing from him. "Mommy." Tears flooded Destiny's eyes, warm and hot, rolling down her cheeks. She knelt beside the couch, taking Samuel's small hand. "I'm here, my love. Mommy's here." Samuel sat up, unsteady but determined, then rushed into Destiny's arms. A tight embrace, awkward but full of trust. Matthew stood frozen, the world around him exploding. He stepped forward, his eyes red, and in one uncontrolled moment, he knelt down to embrace both of them. Destiny, the woman who had once only been the help in this cold house. Samuel, the silent child for so many years, now calling her by the most sacred name. And Matthew, the ice-cold CEO who had locked his heart away, now trembling because of simple happiness. 3 breaths merged into one. 3 hearts beat as one. No one said anything else. They only held each other tightly, as if afraid that if they let go, this moment would vanish. Outside the window, the last light of day streamed in, enveloping them in a gentle glow, as if the entire universe were witnessing this family. A family created from loss, healing, and love, transcending all boundaries. The moment Samuel first called Mommy, Destiny cried. Matthew let go of all his defenses, and the 3 of them embraced in the sunlight. That fateful hug that turned 3 lost souls into a family. Part 10. A complete family. The late afternoon in the outskirts of Seattle, the pale golden sunlight spread across the vast lavender field, dyeing the sky a soft purple. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, their sweet fragrance filling the air, as though soothing every wound that had once existed. Destiny walked through the field of flowers, her simple white dress gliding softly through the lavender branches. In that moment, she felt as if she was no longer the poor girl from Brooklyn, but a part of a fairy tale, a place where all the suffering had receded, and only peace and love remained. In the distance, Samuel ran around, his small legs now more confident than ever. His laughter rang out across the garden, erasing the long days of silence that had haunted the family. Each step Samuel took was proof of the miracle they had fought for together, a journey that not only healed the body, but also healed the heart. Matthew stood still, watching the two most important people in his life. His dark blue suit clung to his tall frame, but his gaze was softer than usual. In his eyes, there was no longer the coldness of a CEO, only the light of a man who was deeply in love and now understood what mattered most. He quietly walked toward Destiny, his heart storming. Each lavender petal brushed his hand. The fragrance filled his breath, and all his senses awakened to remember this moment. When he was just a few steps away, Matthew stopped. He looked at Destiny, her soft hair in the sunlight, her gentle smile as she looked at Samuel, and his heart clenched. This was the image he once thought he would never have, a family. He took a deep breath, his voice low but trembling. Destiny, today I want to tell you something I've kept inside for too long. Destiny turned around, her brown eyes wide with surprise and emotion. In that instant, the breeze brought the scent of lavender, as if reminding her that the most beautiful moments come when we least expect them. The lavender garden was bathed in sunlight, and Matthew was about to speak the words hidden in his heart, setting the stage for the upcoming proposal, creating a sense of anticipation, excitement, and emotion for the readers. The sunset began to pour down on the lavender field, painting the sky with a mystical, golden-orange light. The petals swayed in the breeze, creating waves of purple as vast as the sea. Samuel stopped and turned to look at his parents, his radiant smile making the atmosphere even warmer. Matthew took a step toward Destiny. Then suddenly, he knelt down on the ground covered with lavender petals. The luxurious suit could not hide the trembling heart, and his blue eyes reflected the fiery sunset. Destiny was stunned. She raised her hand to cover her mouth, her heart pounding. Never in her life had she imagined this moment. A cold billionaire, the man who once built an impenetrable wall around himself, now kneeling before her in a lavender field. Like a dream, Matthew opened the small velvet box. Inside was a sparkling platinum ring, the diamond gleaming as though it contained the entire sunset. His voice became hoarse, trembling, but firm. Destiny, I've lost so much in life, and I once thought my heart had no room for anyone else. But then you came in, bringing a smile, bringing hope, and you gave me back the world. Not just for me, but for Samuel. You've done what I thought no one could. You made my son smile, and you made me learn how to love again. Tears streamed down Destiny's cheeks, each drop mingling with the lavender petals. She trembled, her heart tightening with each beat. Matthew looked up, his deep gaze. I don't want to just watch you from afar anymore. I want to hold your hand and walk through every storm, every challenge that lies ahead. Destiny Williams, will you marry me? Samuel, as if drawn into the sacred atmosphere, ran over, his little hand taking his mother's, then placing it on his father's hand. He looked up at Destiny, his tiny lips speaking in a small but clear voice. Mommy. Say yes. Those words struck Destiny's heart like a sweet dagger. The emotional crescendo exploded. She cried out loud, her whole body trembling. All the years of being overlooked, all the long days of struggle, now all erupted in this moment. Destiny choked with emotion, nodding repeatedly, her voice shaking but certain. Yes. Yes. Matthew, I agree. The brilliant sunset covered the three of them, with Samuel hugging both of them, his innocent laughter blending with the tears of joy from his parents. In the vast lavender field, a family had truly formed. The heartfelt proposal, with Samuel innocently supporting it with Mommy. Say yes, turned this moment into an eternal, perfect instant where love overcame all classes and wounds to become a complete family. The atmosphere in the lavender field now resonated with laughter. Long tables covered with pure white cloths were simply but elegantly arranged, adorned with glass vases filled with purple flowers. Golden string lights were hung around the pine trees, which rustled in the wind, creating a scene that was both romantic and intimate. Matthew, still holding Destiny's hand tightly, led her past the guest seats. Their closest family, longtime associates, and Mrs. Lorraine, who had witnessed the transformation of the cold CEO, were all present. They stood and clapped nonstop. Samuel ran playfully around the table, his face beaming with happiness, his small white shirt blending into the soft evening light. He was no longer a child trapped in silence, but now the little soul, bringing joy to everyone. Mrs. Lorraine stepped forward, her eyes welling with tears as she looked at the three of them. Destiny, you've brought what none of us could do. You've given Samuel back his childhood, and you've brought Matthew a heart that knows how to love again. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, Destiny choked up, embracing her, feeling the sincere acceptance she had once thought she would never receive. Matthew raised his glass, his voice low but clear. In my lifetime, I used to think power and money could protect my family, but it turns out a small smile, a warm embrace, is what keeps us standing strong. Tonight, I am no longer a CEO. I am just a lucky man. Because I have Destiny and Samuel. Everyone raised their glasses. Cheers, ringing out under the twinkling yellow lights. Samuel, with his tiny hands, tried to raise his apple juice high. His voice mumbled. For Mommy and Daddy, laughter erupted, but at the same time, tears rolled down Destiny's cheeks. She looked at Matthew, their eyes meeting amidst the applause. In that moment, she knew all the class barriers, all the old wounds, had been erased. A simple but profound blessing, the harmony between friends, family, and love, turned the small party into proof of a love that transcended all barriers. When the music quieted, only the wind softly whispering through the lavender branches remained. Matthew gently set Samuel down. The little boy sat next to the wooden chair, tightly holding the stuffed dinosaur that Destiny had used to make him smile for the first time. His childlike eyes watched, as if waiting for something monumental to happen. Matthew turned around, taking Destiny's hand, his face the once ice-cold CEO, who thought power and money were the only things he could control. Now trembled, fragile, but filled with trust. He suddenly knelt down on the lavender grass, the moonlight pouring down on his shoulder. Destiny froze, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes instantly red. Matthew looked deep into her eyes, his voice hoarse but clear with every word. Destiny, since you entered my and Samuel's life, I've understood what a real home is. You didn't just save my son, you also saved my heart. Give me the chance to continue writing this story with you. Will you marry me? In his hand, a simple but sparkling ring appeared. It wasn't a big diamond, but a platinum ring with a small blue stone the color of Samuel's eyes. Tears rolled down Destiny's cheeks. She bent down, whispering through her tears, Matthew, I once thought I'd spend my whole life outside your world, but now I know. We were born to find each other. She reached out her hand, allowing him to put the ring on. Her fingers trembled, but as the ring slid on, every class barrier, every wall, seemed to fall forever. At that moment, Samuel leapt up, running to embrace both of them. The boy shouted in his mumbled but resounding voice, "Mommy, Daddy, together." The sweet call shattered like fireworks in the hearts of both of them. Matthew and Destiny both cried, holding Samuel, holding each other, amid the sea of lavender bathed in moonlight. The proposal didn't just unite two people, it connected a whole family. From what was once an invisible class divide, there was only love, simple, genuine, and eternal. One late afternoon, the soft golden sunlight stretched across the small yard in the outskirts of the house. Samuel's laughter echoed as he ran joyfully between the rows of lavender trees still covered in dew. In the kitchen, the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. Destiny stood by the stove, her simple white apron, her hair neatly tied back. Matthew walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her, planting a soft kiss on her hair. "I used to think happiness was about controlling everything," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But now I know. Real happiness is letting go of fear and holding tight to the ones you love." Destiny turned around, her eyes wet but glowing. "I also thought the distance between us was too great, but it turns out love is the bridge." Outside, Samuel called out loudly, "Mommy, Daddy, come play with me." They looked at each other, smiled, and walked out to the porch. Their laughter blended with the wind. The sun set, creating a complete picture that all three had longed for. No longer were there closed doors, no longer any icy walls. There was only the laughter of a child, the embrace of a man once alone, and the heart of a woman strong enough to break all barriers. Patience and love can break the coldest walls, and sometimes what we need is not a miracle, but someone brave enough to stay with us. Do you think what helps a family once broken find happiness again? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you feel this story touched your heart, please rate it from 0 to 10. Don't forget to follow and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next CEO love story.